everyone. My name is Lynette Davis with LynetteDavis.com, and I want to thank you for joining me for this year's Be the Change series. I am super excited because I have a very special guest, a young lady that I met through not even social media. We actually met in a group via Oh Hey Shanae. So I'm giving props where props are due. But I am going to let her tell you more about who she is and what she does. So welcome, Jardana. How are you?
I'm doing good, Lynette. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So I know people are like, okay, so who is this Jardana chick? She's super excited and she's doing her cheesy smile in my rocking chair. So could you just give us a brief intro about who you are and the work that you do?
Who I am? Well, I am a leadership consultant and coach, and I work with organizations that are involved in change-making work, and I work with change makers all across the world to support them through burnout and overwhelm and trauma and towards sustainability and greater wellness and healing so that folks can show up in the ways that they want and the ways they need to and the ways the world needs them to. So that is what I do. I'm also, an activist and a longtime holistic healer and yoga practitioner, and I weave all of that into what I do and how I do it. And I'm a writer, and I facilitate an online space called Radical Well and a platform called Radical Well, which is a gathering place for the intersections of healing and wellness and social change, thought and creativity and practice, so that folks can have the tools that they need to show up.
Awesome.
That's a little bit about what I do and who I am.
Awesome. I know, you know what? When we ask, so who are you? That's actually a really loaded question. And a lot of people, and I like how you reframed that because you started with what you do and you made sure to say, this is what I do, not who I am. Because a lot of times we say, well, who are you? Well, I'm a teacher and I'm this, but that's kind of what we do, not necessarily who we are is a part of who we are, but it really is what we do, not who we are. Awesome. So I love that you were talking about the work that you do and it being kind of the intersection between social justice work and workplace wellness. I heard some holistic health in there as well. So being that you said that, I am curious because I'm really excited to hear your answer on this. But in the work that you do, what does the phrase "be the change" mean to you? What does that represent, especially in relation to the type of work that you do?
Well, I mean, I think we're in a time right now in the United States and in the world. We're in a time of crisis. We're in a time of incredible hope and change. And there is a lot of trauma in the world, and folks feel that trauma, right? They feel it just in living in the world, and they feel it depending upon what their bodies look like and how those bodies are presented in the world. And they feel that in the kind of folks that I work with that are change maker folks, right? So what often I have found that happens is that change makers who are attracted to the work of making change in the world because there was a time in their lives when they were marginalized or oppressed, traumatized, and kind of went through a healing process or transformation and realized and kind of lived through this experience and helped them understand, like, oh, this is needed, like, in the world. This is beyond me. But the body is a site of an accumulation of all that is happening, all of the trauma, all of the hopelessness, all of the hope, all of the vision, all of that, our history, our ancestors, there's generational trauma. So everything is accumulated in the body, right? And so I see, the individual as part of a larger pulse of humanity. And so being the change is a two-part, more than that, but to simplify it, a two-part process. There's both the personal and then there's the external, and kind of how you're showing up in the world. And in order for you to show up, you have to give attention to the personal practice, spiritual practice, wellness, healing practice, whatever it is, but some sort of practice that is grounding and holding you in a container of support and love and care so that you can show up and be the change. However, in order for us to show up and be the change, the structures in place need to reflect the same values of that. So the structures around us need to reflect care and love and change, and to be able to hold a container for healing, right? And so I think, being the change in the world it's not just an individual thing. It's, it's an individual and community thing. It's something that happens simultaneously and in conversation with. Maybe you have a follow-up question. I don't know. I kind of just went on.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. I was, when you were talking about the two aspects, and you're right, it's so much, we don't operate in a vacuum, right? So it's very dynamic when we want to talk about change and being a change. So I totally understood the individual aspect, but when you were talking about the external, the first word that kind of came to me was about a collective conscious and a global effort. Could you kind of correct me on that? Is that where you were kind of heading with that?
I guess I'm saying that, in change making work specifically, which is, the sector that I'm working in. So nonprofits, organizations that are focused on healing, that are focused on movement building, that are focused on change making efforts, in a wide range of ways, whether that's interrupting violence against women, or, Black Lives Matter, or, whether that's, some sort of service-based healing and health, whatever, right? Is that there's the internal work that happens in folks, but then there's the external work, right, that happens in the change-making efforts that we're enacting through our organizations, through our groups, right? And so that is what I am spending a lot more attention on and helping to facilitate, is how we can internally reflect in our organizations, in our movements, how we can internally reflect the social justice that we're outputting in the world. Because if we're not paying attention to the organizational structures and policies and procedures and values and how that is or isn't showing up, then our change-making efforts are pretty short-sighted and very short-term.
Very good point. Very good point. So, because you kind of already started kind of going into this, you talking about the work that you do and who you work with, especially those who are change makers. You mentioned in your quick intro about an online community, Radical Well, which I'm very familiar with, but I don't want to assume everybody watching this is. Right. Could you tell me a little bit more about what facilitating a group like that looks like, and what you're hoping to accomplish by creating this online space? Because I know that there might be some people watching and they're wondering, well, I'll give an example. For instance, they might be an introvert like myself, for instance, and they're going, okay, I want to contribute to this, whatever, but I feel most comfortable in the online space. So how can, what does create an online space for people to contribute to this movement of sorts? of
Mm-hmm.
being radically well.
Right. Good. That was good, Lynette. I like that. Well, Radical Well right now is going through a big growth period. So I'm excited to talk a little bit about like what it is and what it's becoming. So Radical Well right now is, I mean, it's a platform and it's a methodology that I've been researching and kind of putting together around that kind of internal, external exchange of healing and wellness and how it's needed in order for us to be the leaders that we want and the world needs us to be, right? So Radical Well is an online space right now, is a Facebook community that, you know, where we post, where folks can post questions, folks can ask for resources, folks can share resources, and then it's a place where we round up those resources on a monthly basis and offer them back up to the community so folks can reference back to them. Every Wednesday, we have Wednesday Well, where I am live for 30 minutes online from 12 to 12:30 on Eastern Time. We've been taking we took a vacation in July, but we're back live in August. And that is a space for us to talk about something specifically. So in the past, we've talked about overwhelm, we've talked about trauma, we've talked about money. So anything that has to do with wellness and healing and and bringing a social justice analysis to that, we cover in that space. And that usually is a pretty vibrant thread. It's not a video. It's not a video live. It's like it's just me being present on Facebook, in the Facebook group, answering questions, stimulating discussions. And that as a platform is going to be enhanced in a lot of ways. I just recently have brought onto my team someone that's going to be, really focused on building Radical Well as a community and as a platform. So we're going to be capturing some of those really deep and, interesting and thoughtful, paradigm-shifting conversations that we're having in that space to be able to, bring that out into a wider space. And then additionally, Radical Well is beginning an online periodical that will draw, from folks all over the world, draw from folks in their thought, in their creativity, art, things that contribute to this radical well and how you live radically, how you live a radical well life and like what that means. So that's an exciting, development that is happening right now. And the vision for that is that, starting next year, that's going to be a place where not only are all of these thought pieces and visionary pieces kind of coming together around those intersections of healing, wellness, and social justice and leadership, but also that that's a place where we can start paying writers and paying artists so that their contributions are, more than we're just offering a platform, but we're also offering support, monetary support for, the thinking and the, methodologies that people are offering and sharing, because that's so needed right now, that space, and to, create sustainable structures for people to be able to show up in that way. So that's a little bit of the development of kind of what's happening with Radical Well. I will say another thing is that it's also a place where resources are created. So I recently just put together, in collaboration with a bunch of folks in the US, a collaborative manual specifically for white people, how white people can show up more for racial justice, and it's called Practice Showing Up. And so that's a publication of the Radical Well that will be distributed in the next few weeks. That's completely free. So things like that are things that we develop out of that, but a real gathering of people and thoughts, and just providing a lot of mentorship and support for folks' wellness and well-being, and kind of interrogating the question of how do you be well in a capitalist, patriarchal, white supremacist society.
Awesome. I mean, like I said, I have been keeping up with your work. I think it's awesome. And I love what you're doing. So, but you see, it's easy for me to say that, right? Because obviously we both connected because we both very much so care about social justice and wellness and health. But for somebody coming from the outside looking in, they're going, okay, well, I hear about this radically well, and you're talking about health and wellness, but then you're bringing this social justice stuff in. I don't know about all this social justice stuff. I mean, I'm okay with, recycling. Not to put that down because recycling is important, but so maybe, I might be interested in this wellness stuff, but why should someone kind of care about this kind of work? And what would somebody new into wanting to contribute to this conversation and in this new space that you're going to be creating? What would that look like for them?
So I think a lot, people come in at different places and, different levels of engagement and interest. I guess I would say why it matters is on a human level, we're all connected. And when folks are marginalized, when folks are dying in the streets at the rate that they are, I mean, that is just the truth. There's no denying it, that Black and brown bodies are dying at a rate that is, it's just too many and it's too much. And that's a fact that's undeniable. So when that's happening, I mean, and that has been happening since the founding of this country, in the US. But when that's happening and folks are standing up and saying, you know what, folks, white folks who are in faith, faith communities, white folks that are in spiritual communities, white people in yoga communities, people are coming into consciousness at a rapid rate. Because right now there is a moral question at hand, which is, which side of history will you be on? Will you be on the side of history that is about making change and bringing more justice, or will you be on the side of history of silence and racism and the genocide of people, right? So this is an opportunity to decide and determine what side of history you will be on. I recently wrote a piece that was published in Elephant Journal that was, the title was How White People Can Show Up for Racial Justice. And it's not always about being in the streets and being in the microphone. It's not always about showing up in these huge, big ways. I mean, you were talking about being an introvert, right? There are other ways to contribute. Like sometimes it's about having an uncomfortable conversation with your family. Sometimes it's about reading and better understanding the state of the world from the perspective of different kinds of folks, and not just relying on one news source for all the analysis of what's happening. Sometimes it's about there's a wide range of ways to interact with us. But basically, the deal is that we are human beings that are connected, and when there is pain, when there is trauma, that's something you're going to feel. And for white folks especially, racism is something that divides us from each other. It's something that closes our hearts, and it's something that needs to be broken open. And when you break open your whiteness, when you break open, the silence that and the heaviness that racism places in your body and in your life, when you break that open, transformation will happen. Things will move and change and shift. And it's like you're all of a sudden awake. And that is what lifting up the veil of white privilege will do for you. And so it's about, again, making a choice. Which side of history will you be on? Will you be one, on the side of complacency and the side of just following orders without question? Or will you be on the side of liberation and justice for all people, including yourself?
I like that you, of all the things that you said, your last statement was also inclusive. It was about justice for other people who might be who are oppressed and marginalized, but you also said that was also about liberation for yourself as well. And I think that was important that you said that. Awesome, awesome. That was really deep. I wasn't expecting that type of response, but I felt your passion through this camera. I felt it bleeding.
It's a powerful time, Linda. You know, we gotta show it up.
Awesome, awesome. So, with everything that you just talked about, because a lot of the work that you said you do, you're working with leaders. So I'm curious, and let's just say, leaders in a space that they're working with, other activists, change makers, grassroots organizations, causes, and things of that nature. So, but you want to create a platform and grow a space where you can help support other people and be able to compensate them, which turns into something that's more businessy. So how can business owners who maybe they might be in more the the for-profit world kind of collaborate with people who are change makers in the not-for-profit world and together create a real impact? Or I should say, what are some of your ideas for making that kind of happen?
Yes, I mean, I want to be really clear. Like, I am a business, right? Like, I operate as a business, and but a social entrepreneurial kind of model. And I think that right now, that is the real question, and the real need is to rethink how we're doing change-making work, because there's a nonprofit industrial complex that's not working right now, and in business, I think there's some really innovative ways that there have been some crossovers. I'll lift up a few. I mean, I think like Thistle Farms out of Nashville, Tennessee has a very interesting business model. They have, they're like a hybrid between a nonprofit and a business model. They offer healing services, service-based services through, women's homes. And then they have a restaurant that's run by folks that are going through, healing through the women's homes. And they run a coffee shop. And then they have a line of products that is like specifically around like healing, where they create essential oils and soaps and things like that. So it's a multi-tiered kind of like business, social entrepreneurial model. Then you have something like Betty's Daughter Arts Collaborative, which is a cultural organizing institution based in New York City that works all over the South and the world. And they are, an innovative business that, does kind of similar work in some ways, in the sense that they go into organizations and work with them around cultural organizing, which is the idea that wellness and healing are foundation for shifting and changing practices and policies, and that social change happens because culture comes together with art, which comes together with spirit, which comes together with wellness, right? And so they do that work organizationally, but then they also have support majority Black and people of color artists in residencies, and they have the Body Ecology Project, which comes together around different issues like reproductive justice and different things like that. So that is also runs as a business, but has a very social justice mission, or pull and scope of how they do the work, right? And so I think that some of the best models out there are the ones that feed the other, and they kind of feed into each other. so that, you know, you have the work that brings in the money, right? And then that money that funds the other more social aspects of what you do and how you operate. And that there's constantly a redistribution of wealth, of income, of capital, so that you are constantly lifting up and in collaboration with folks who maybe don't have the connection to resources in the same ways that you might. And that in doing that work, then you're creating a much wider impact in the world, but you're also, you know, in collaboration with people that are bringing skills and talents that you don't have and are moving work, you know, out in a much better and different way. So I think that that's the real question right now is, you know, business as usual just isn't working. You can't business as usual when the world is in crisis. And, you know, when you do, it's confusing. It's, you know, it's like, well, no one, I mean, when I get things on my feed, like, you know, become more visible, 10 steps to, you know, show up in your leadership, and there's no indication of anything that's happening in the world, that feels really empty to me and it doesn't make any sense. And I don't want to be engaged in that. But what I do want to be engaged in is new thinking, in, you know, risk taking, in people putting their bodies and their mouths, you know, in motion and putting their money there too. Because, I mean, you can make money, that's all well and good, you know, and you can make millions of dollars. But if that's not funneling back in some way into community building and economic, you know, development and redistribution of wealth and power, then you're contributing to problems of white supremacy, capitalism, and patriarchy, heterosexism, etc., you know, that is tearing this country apart and not building it up.
Wow. Awesome points. And I love that you gave some examples. Hopefully you don't mind if I link those, the two that came really clear cut. That way people can kind of see some models. Jardana, herself as an example, because as she said, she is a for-profit business, yet doing this type of work that seems extremely like some work that a nonprofit organization would do, but instead you get to work with women leaders of various organizations, not necessarily just, you know, nonprofits. I imagine you might even have some leaders of for-profit businesses going, I want to incorporate some of this into this business model that we have, you know, for workplace wellness, but also for giving back for employees who might want to have some time to go take up a cause or things of that nature. And I have seen that in some corporates. It's a start. Awesome. So I am so over. When Jardana here got passionate, I was letting her run with it because that's what you do, right? So, but I know I do have to wrap this up. So, before we go, could you just leave us with one final actionable piece of advice that we can take with us as we move forward in our own individual contributions to being the change that we would like to see in the world, in our society, in our town, in our small communities, in our own home, within our own bodies?
Yeah. You know, I guess what's coming to me is that we are divine beings and we are put onto this earth in this moment in time for a very particular reason. And so as much as possible, stepping into those spaces and structures and practices that are going to connect you to that inner wisdom, that, you know, place of clarity around what your unique, you know, placement and gift and movement is in this world. and then moving closer to that is going to benefit everybody and leave the world a better place than we entered it.
Awesome. Awesome. Jardana, I am so delighted that you were able to join us today. Thank you so much for the wisdom nuggets, the passion, and very concrete things that, you know, people can take into consideration, whether they're yay or nay for it. I like that you presented us with the two options of, you know, what side of justice, you know, in history do you want to be on? That was a really important question. It even made me kind of stop and think about it, and also about the way that we show up for our work. So I truly appreciate that, and I appreciate you.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me in this moment in time, because, you know, this is about healing. You know, me, you, and everybody who's watching and listening too.
Awesome, awesome. Everyone, hopefully you got some awesome tips and advice and wisdom and aha moments from listening to this conversation, and feel free to keep the conversation going. You know, we got it started, or actually we continued a conversation that's already been taking place. But continue it. You know, it doesn't even have to stop with a conversation. You know, you could take a conversation to the next level. So, you know, until next time, go ahead, go be the change. Take care, everybody. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening if you just kind of plugged it in. And peace.